Have you ever noticed how success seems to come faster to the man who stops broadcasting his every move and instead channels that energy inward? Have you realized that the more you turn your attention to yourself, not selfishly but strategically, the more the world begins to respond in your favor? This is the secret known by every man who has risen quietly, consistently, without applause. They weren't born with more talent. They didn't have better luck. They simply mastered something most people overlook: focus. Not shallow concentration, not half-hearted attempts to work on themselves between distractions. I'm talking about absolute, unapologetic, disciplined focus. The kind that builds a foundation so strong that even in silence, it speaks louder than the noise of 1,000 empty declarations. When you begin to focus entirely on yourself, not as an escape, but as an elevation, you change the way your life unfolds. You begin to value solitude more than approval. You start to protect your time with the same intensity a warrior protects his sword. You no longer chase things that do not align. You no longer explain your silence. You stop giving others access to your mind, and suddenly your mind becomes clear enough to guide you to wealth, peace, and purpose. There's a reason most people never see real transformation. They are too public with their struggle and too distracted in their process. They confuse noise with progress. They seek validation for effort before they've earned the result. And every time they post their intention, they release the very energy they need to complete it. They burn their power trying to be seen instead of letting their results make the announcement. But you, the man committed to growth, know better. You've decided that your focus is sacred, that your time is not for sale, that your mental space is not a billboard for insecurity, comparison, or false identity. You're not becoming less social, you're becoming more sovereign. And that shift changes everything. The world around you begins to feel different because you are different. You're not rushing anymore. You're not seeking approval anymore. You've disconnected from the chaos and tapped into a rhythm that few can understand but everyone can feel. You become the man who walks in a room and doesn't need to speak to be heard. Not because of arrogance, but because your energy is earned. People wonder how you did it. They'll ask what changed. But you won't have a simple answer, because it wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small decisions made in silence, 1,000 early mornings, 1,000 repetitions of invisible work. 1,000 times you chose discipline over dopamine, patience over performance, principles over popularity, and that is why your life begins to shift. The man who focuses on himself does not wait for motivation. He understands that motivation is fleeting, but commitment is eternal. He has trained his mind to obey. Not just in public when others are watching, but especially in private where habits are formed, where weaknesses are faced, where the real war is won. He builds habits that become laws. He treats his time like treasure. He surrounds himself only with what supports the man he is becoming. Every thought, every meal, every movement, every conversation is measured, not to be obsessive, but to be intentional, because that's what focus does. It turns randomness into rhythm. It turns moments into momentum. It turns life into legacy. You do not need to shout your goals to the world. In fact, the more you keep them private, the more potent they become. There is a power in secrecy, not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting. Protecting your energy from those who would drain it. Protecting your process from those who wouldn't understand it. Protecting your dream until it is strong enough to walk on its own. Have you noticed that the more you focus inward, the less drama you attract? That's not coincidence. That's clarity. People who live in chaos are magnets for chaos. But the man who cultivates inner order becomes immune to external disorder. His peace is not a result of what's happening outside, it is a reflection of what he has mastered within. Let the others talk. Let them scroll. Let them chase. You build quietly, relentlessly, authentically. You become the man who does not flinch under pressure because he has been pressure tested in solitude. You become the man who does not need to prove anything because he lives in alignment. And alignment is a force. It is invisible but undeniable. This is not about isolation. It's about elevation. You are not walking away from the world. You are rising above it. And in doing so, you are creating a new reality, one where your focus builds freedom, your silence builds strength, and your discipline becomes the currency of everything you desire. And you do it all without needing to be understood. Because the truth is, not everyone is supposed to understand. Some people will mistake your focus for arrogance. Some will call your silence avoidance. Some will misread your absence as weakness. Let them. Their misunderstanding is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is your becoming. Your responsibility is your craft. Your health, your mind, your mission. And nothing outside of that deserves your energy. You begin to live by a new standard, not a schedule, but a standard, a code, a way of being. You are no longer moved by opinions because you've become grounded in purpose. You are no longer caught up in emotion because you've built a system that honors your vision more than your feelings. And when feelings rise, as they always will, you don't suppress them, you discipline them. Discipline is not about punishment. It's about positioning. It's the act of placing yourself where success has no choice but to find you. It is the daily agreement that your future is more important than your current mood. It is the commitment to consistency over intensity. It is the understanding that focus is not just something you use, it is something you become. And as you become that focus, your life transforms, not overnight, but undeniably. You'll start to notice the small changes first. Your mornings feel cleaner. Your thoughts feel sharper. Your distractions lose their grip. Your time becomes your own. And from that ownership comes creation. Real creation. A business, a body, a belief system, a legacy, something that didn't exist before you focused long enough to build it. You stop reacting, you start responding. You stop needing, you start providing. You stop chasing, you start attracting. Not because you're manipulating energy, because you're mastering yourself. That's what focus is. It's the return to self, the reclamation of power, the awakening of the man you were always meant to be. So you stay the course. You protect your energy. You live below the noise. You build above the trends. And when the world wonders how you did it, you'll simply smile, not because you're hiding anything, but because you earned everything in silence, with focus, on purpose. You will never find your highest potential in the noise of the world. You will only find it in the stillness you create, in the silence you defend, and in the sacred space where your focus can operate without interference. It is in that quiet construction that the extraordinary is born. Not with fanfare, not with applause, but with conviction. When a man decides to focus entirely on himself, he begins to understand a truth that most never discover. You do not need the world to change before you do. The external is a reflection of the internal. As you sharpen your thoughts, you cut through confusion. As you heighten your standards, you elevate your environment. As you choose structure, your life begins to organize itself around your mission. And it happens in such a subtle yet powerful way that it often feels like magic, until you remember that it was built on pure discipline. No man who has ever built anything of substance did so while constantly checking to see who was watching. You don't build legacy by being seen. You build it by being serious. Serious with your time. Serious with your energy. Serious with the process long before it shows results. And when you get that serious, you stop negotiating with comfort. You stop delaying decisions that must be made. You stop playing with your potential like it's a toy. It's not. It's a responsibility. The more you focus on yourself, the more obvious this becomes. You realize how much of your energy was spent on things that did not matter, on conversations that served no purpose, on digital distractions that drained your day, on explaining your decisions to people who were never meant to understand your destination. And when you remove those layers, you start to breathe differently. You think more clearly. You act more decisively. And those small shifts compound. Because success is not the result of one giant leap. It is the result of thousands of tiny acts performed in silence with precision. You train. You plan. You reflect. You read. You cut what no longer aligns. You double down on what does. You become obsessed not with image, but with integrity. The integrity of your morning routine. The integrity of your thoughts. The integrity of your follow-through. And that integrity becomes your identity. The old you, reactive, scattered, noisy, starts to fade. Not by force, but by focus. And in his place emerges a man who moves differently, who speaks only when necessary, who walks into a room not to impress, but to observe, to see where value can be added, where problems can be solved, where leadership is missing, and then fill that space without ever needing to announce it. This is what happens when you master the art of inward focus. You stop asking for the path to be easier. You start asking yourself how you can become stronger, because you no longer crave the comfort of the crowd. You crave the clarity of solitude, the sharpness that comes from isolation, not forever, but long enough to meet the version of you that only shows up when everything unnecessary is stripped away. And when you meet that version of yourself, you won't want to go back. Because that man doesn't need validation. He validates himself through action. That man doesn't speak of his potential. He proves it in private. That man doesn't worry who notices. He's too busy becoming undeniable. You see, the man who focuses inward begins to experience a new kind of power, not the loud, boastful kind. The deep, quiet, immovable kind. The kind that doesn't chase. The kind that draws, that attracts. Not by manipulation, but by alignment. He becomes aligned with his purpose and therefore aligned with opportunity. He becomes aligned with his habits and therefore aligned with progress. He becomes aligned with his thoughts and therefore aligned with peace. There is a reason few ever reach this place. It requires a level of self-honesty that most run from. It requires you to sit in silence and ask questions you don't always want the answers to look at your patterns without justification, to take responsibility for your inconsistencies, to study your failures not with shame but with seriousness, and to decide, not wish, not hope, but decide that your next chapter will be written in discipline. From that decision, everything shifts. Not immediately, but inevitably. You stop being available for people who drain you. You stop compromising with behaviors that betray you. You stop celebrating intentions and start demanding execution. Because you're no longer interested in motivation. You are interested in momentum. And momentum is built by doing the same thing in the same direction with increasing intensity until what was once difficult becomes automatic and what was once impossible becomes expected. And that doesn't happen with noise, it happens with narrowness. You narrow your circle. You narrow your attention. You narrow your aim. And the narrower your focus, the greater your impact. The men who achieve the most in life are not those who did everything. They're the ones who mastered something, who obsessed over their craft, who treated their time as sacred, who moved with such consistency that the world had no choice but to respond. You have that power, but it will cost you the things that keep most men average. It will cost you the urge to be liked. It will cost you the need to be understood. It will cost you the distractions you once called entertainment. It will cost you comfort, applause, and temporary pleasure. But what it gives you in return, clarity, control, confidence, capability, is worth every ounce of that sacrifice. And once you taste that level of personal power, you never go back. You stop chasing your future because you become a man who creates it. You stop doubting yourself because your actions are evidence. You stop fearing loss because your value is not based on what you have, but who you become. And who you become is dangerous, not to others, but to limitation. You are dangerous to procrastination, dangerous to distraction, dangerous to doubt. Because now, when those forces come knocking, they find no entry point. You've fortified the mind. You've sealed the gates. You built a life that honors your standards so completely that compromise has no oxygen left to breathe. You did this not by shouting, but by sharpening. Not by explaining, but by executing. Not by waiting, but by working. And now, your work speaks for you. So you continue. Not because you need to prove, but because you refuse to pause. Not because you're running, but because you're rising. Not because of fear, but because of focus. And in that focus, you become untouchable, not invincible, but intentional. Not flawless, but unshakable. Not perfect, but prepared. And when you are prepared, life bends. Not all at once. Not always visibly, but inevitably, because life will always favor the man who is prepared, who is precise, who is practiced in silence while others are shouting in chaos. That man builds quietly, lives intentionally, and wins in silence. There is something extraordinary that begins to unfold when a man commits to his path so completely that he no longer needs to explain it, when he no longer needs to check in with the opinions of others, when he no longer looks outward for validation because he's cultivated an inner world that runs on principle, not pressure. That kind of man becomes rare, and with that rarity comes power, because the rarest thing in the modern world is a man who is truly fully focused. The man who stays focused on himself does not lose sight of the external world. He simply refuses to be controlled by it. He's aware of the distractions. He sees the trends, the temptations, the detours, but none of them are stronger than the vision he has built within. And because of that, he walks with a presence that cannot be faked, a steadiness that cannot be shaken, and a level of personal peace that cannot be purchased. You'll know you've reached this point when your days begin to feel lighter, not because the work is easier, but because you are stronger. You're no longer weighed down by the desire to impress. You're no longer tied up in the pursuit of external approval. You wake up with clarity. You move with intention. You work not to be seen, but because the act of working itself shapes you into the man you respect. And that self-respect becomes your fuel. It's no longer about proving your worth to others. It's about keeping your word to yourself. And when a man consistently keeps his word to himself, he becomes unstoppable, not because he's faster, louder, or smarter, but because he's aligned. And alignment produces a momentum that cannot be mimicked by hype or noise. It's quiet, it's methodical, but it is undeniable. Focus becomes the filter through which every decision is made. Should I spend time on this? Should I respond to that? Should I allow this into my day? Into my mind? Into my space? When you've trained your attention through repetition, these questions become instinctive. You don't need to pause and analyze, you feel what's right. Because your internal compass has been sharpened through silent discipline. This doesn't mean you don't face temptation, you do. But now, temptation feels like noise. It feels like static, interrupting the signal. And you've become addicted to signal. Clean thoughts, clear goals, high standards. So when distraction knocks, you don't wrestle with it. You simply don't open the door. You're too busy building something real. And as you build, your vision deepens. What once felt far away now feels inevitable. Not because life got easier, but because you got closer. And with that proximity comes confidence, not the loud, performative confidence that shouts for attention, but the quiet, grounded confidence that walks into any room and listens first, observes, measures, and moves only when movement matters. This man doesn't ask for opportunity. He creates it. He doesn't chase money. He attracts it by becoming the kind of person money wants to stay with. He doesn't need people to recognize his potential. He actualizes it in private until it becomes obvious. He no longer fights battles that don't belong to him. He has nothing to prove and nothing to protect. His life is not about defense, it's about direction. And every morning he rises not to respond to the world, but to lead himself through it. Because the man who leads himself is the man who ends up leading everything else. This is what it means to focus on yourself and win in silence. Not to withdraw from the world, but to rise above the need to be fed by it. Not to become isolated, but to become independent in your thinking. You now build your peace, your power, and your prosperity from the inside out. You no longer wait for permission. You no longer wait for ideal conditions. You've created a personal system so rooted in discipline that success becomes the byproduct of simply showing up and doing what you said you'd do. Others will wonder how you're doing it. They'll assume it's luck or talent or some shortcut they haven't found yet. But you'll know the truth. It's not luck. It's not talent. It's the decision you made long ago to prioritize structure over spontaneity, discipline over distraction, long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure. You've made peace with being misunderstood, with being seen as too quiet, too intense, too serious. Because those who criticize your silence don't understand the weight of vision. They don't know what it's like to wake up with a purpose so sharp that small talk feels like sabotage. They don't know what it means to have a goal that demands everything from you, including the parts you've outgrown. And yes, you will outgrow much. Old habits, old patterns, even old versions of yourself. The version of you that needed applause. The version of you that responded to every distraction. The version of you that doubted your worth when results were delayed. That man will fall away. Not all at once, but piece by piece, with every disciplined decision you make. And what remains is a man who doesn't just focus on himself, he embodies that focus. It's in the way he walks, the way he breathes, the way he chooses silence over spectacle, the way he respects his time like it's currency, the way he invests his energy like it's capital, the way he holds himself accountable when no one's looking. And perhaps most importantly, it's in the way he doesn't flinch when things get hard, because he's not looking for ease. He's looking for growth. He's not looking to escape the pressure. He's developing the capacity to carry it. Because he knows the weight of responsibility is not something to be feared, it's something to be earned. And he earns it every single day he shows up, not for the world, but for himself. So if you've made it this far in your journey, understand this: you're not behind. You're not missing anything. You're not late. You are exactly where you need to be to become who you were always meant to be. And the more you double down on your focus, the faster everything else will catch up. Your environment will align. Your income will multiply. Your confidence will solidify. Your purpose will clarify. And it will all feel so natural because it won't be the result of forcing, it will be the result of becoming. So keep going. Don't explain. Don't negotiate. Don't announce. Just move. Quietly, daily, deeply. Stay loyal to your system. Stay married to your discipline. Stay addicted to your evolution. Because there is no finish line in this game. There is only progress. There is only the next level of clarity, the next layer of strength, the next dimension of impact. And the only way to reach it is to stay focused long enough to meet the version of you who already lives there. He's not louder. He's not faster. He's not luckier. He's just more disciplined, more focused. and more at peace with building in silence while the rest of the world watches. Because in the end, the man who wins is not the man who talked the most. It's not the man who posted the most. It's not the man who was seen the most. It's the man who built the most, and he built it not by chance, not by charm, but by choosing every single day to focus on himself. And that man is you.